Hi, and welcome to the Burgess Crew podcast, where today we're digging into the power of the mind, specifically emotional resilience.
I think that it's important also to recognise that emotional resilience runs throughout everything that we do. So one of my views is that the environment's always changing and the only thing that's constant is ourselves. And if we understand ourselves and how we respond and our qualities that we can bring to any given change in circumstances, any change in the environment around us, then better placed to be emotionally resilient.
Now, I have to admit, I didn't know much about this topic before talking to Ruth and Richard, so I was really curious to learn more about a subject that I hear talked about quite a lot in various circles. As accredited therapists and coaches who have set up a company which, amongst other things, helps people build emotional resilience, they were the obvious choice to invite on the show. And I came away with an appreciation for the difference between reacting and responding, and how if we understand our minds better, we can actually control our reactions in tough situations. Hi, Richard. Hi, Ruth. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Very well. Thanks. Lovely to be here.
I'm well too. Thank you. And again, thank you for inviting us on.
Well, thank you for joining us. I was just saying that I'm intrigued by this topic, emotional resilience. It's something that I've heard of, something that I've read about, but actually probably don't know enough about. So I'm quite keen to dig deep and, find out a little bit more about what you mean by emotional resilience. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit more about yourselves, your background, and CSAGE, the company that you've set up?
So I'm a therapist and a coach, and prior to that I had some experience in the Scottish Ambulance Service in the Specialist Ops division, which was supporting major incidents, so working with chemical, biological, radiological or nuclear type incidents. So with all of that background, CSAGE seemed like a good way to blend all of these skills into an offering.
Wow, so they're the real big topics there, nuclear. Yeah. Oof. And Richard, how about you?
Yeah, I'm a therapist and coach as well. I've got more of a checkered history than Ruth. I started out in the police when I was a mere boy. Then I worked in Merseyside Police. And from Merseyside Police, I went into the National Crime Squad of England and Wales, and then the Serious Organised Crime Agency, which is a national crime agency. So I had a full career there, and during that time, that's when I trained up to be a counsellor. And I also fitted in a couple of years in the Royal Army Medical Corps in the Volunteer Reserve. When I left policing, that's when I started to really get my head down, start doing some studying around counselling, done a master's degree and then on to do my doctorate. And during that time I worked in Liverpool and in London in the National Health Service as a therapist in primary care mental health. And when I left the NHS, I then told you this was checkered, didn't I? I then went on to work in university. So I started out in Liverpool University in the student counselling service and then moved over to Chester University and worked there up until and through the COVID time period. So 2 years of working online, I moved home away from Chester and decided that I would set up in private practice, working exclusively online as a therapist and as a coach.
Wow. So with both of your paths, and emotional resilience is a topic, I guess, that you've both come across, in the police and even universities, the stress from students. So it's something that you've worked with all your lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And cultivating our own emotional resilience throughout all of these different experiences and trainings as well has been really useful.
I think that's one of the key things. And you said earlier you were interested in emotional resilience, but you've got it. Hopefully, when we start discussing it and the definitions of it, you'll recognise it in yourself. And I agree with Ruth that you can develop in. You can build on the areas where you perhaps be a little bit more vulnerable. And so that for me is one of the key things about emotional resilience, that it isn't just you've either got it or you haven't.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. What do we mean by emotional resilience?
So to put it really simply, emotional resilience is when you're able to calm your frantic mind after encountering a negative experience. It's how well we manage and cope after something difficult happens.
I mean, we all have day-to-day stresses of varying levels. Talking specifically about yacht crew, the day-to-day stresses and strains of working on board yachts, the timescales, potential lack of sleep. Emotional resilience would help crew cope with that.
Yes, I think more resilient people are able to go with the flow and adapt to adversity without lasting damage. I think less resilient people have a bit of a harder time with stress and life changes, both major and minor.
So when Ruth says situations and things, it's easy to get dragged into thinking that emotional resilience just relates to things like being late to get the kids to school, or something that's happened on board yacht that puts you under pressure and is really challenging. I think that it's important also to recognise that emotional resilience runs throughout everything that we do. So one of my views is that the environment's always changing, and the only thing that's constant is ourselves. And if we understand ourselves and how we respond and our qualities that we can bring to any given change in circumstances, any change in the environment around us, then we're better placed to be emotionally resilient. So think in metaphorical terms, if you think of the sea, it's always changing. And that old chest that anyone can hold the tiller when the sea is calm is true. It's true of life. But when things start to stack up, or when it becomes choppy seas, to use an analogy, that's when you start pulling in at deeper levels of your emotional resilience. And the emotional resilience, I believe, are aware of where their strengths and vulnerabilities lie as well. So there is a time of saying, handing over to somebody else to take a situation you're not particularly skilled or capable to deal with.
Okay. I mentioned earlier that this is quite a new topic to me. So I have done some reading, and some of the key words that I've picked up, two of them that kind of struck a chord was perseverance and optimism as two words that help define what we mean by resilient. Would you agree with that?
I think optimism is a really wonderful word here, because optimism is also associated with that concept of like holding hope. And when we can hold hope, we can believe that things can get better.
And sometimes I think that, if you put it in the context of a really challenging situation on board a yacht, I don't know, some kind of relational issue, maybe with the clients or maybe with some of your crew, I think that perseverance, having a recognition that you've got to sort of get yourself through this, you've got to build some kind of relationship and maintain it for a period of time to get a particular job done, then yeah, perseverance would fit for me.
So are we talking about learning new ways of coping, learning new ways of dealing with stresses, events, life events?
Yeah, I would say so, for sure. And there's lots of different models that people such as myself and Ruth can help with, that can help you to understand whatever it is that you're faced with. So if I'm going to say this again, if the environment around you changes, you're really comfortable, the environment changes, then there are different models that can help you to understand what is going on in order that you give yourself choice about how to behave. So I say, for instance, there's a guy called Eric Byrne back in the 1960s, and he developed a model called transactional analysis. And I know that that's a mouthful, but essentially he wrote a book called Games People Play. And people do play games. And within that, he gave a structure for how you could understand how you respond to other people. Some people may recognize it as a parent, adult, child model. Probably haven't got time to go into it now and do it any great justice. But there are three sort of ways of being empowered and how you use that power. Being empowered and sharing it with the other people, and being disempowered and having to get your needs met. And even if you understand those three basic levels, then that can help you, give you choice about how you're going to deal with a situation that you're faced with regards to people. So a classic one for me was whenever I was called in, sitting in the waiting room at a doctor's surgery, and it comes at Mr. Mason to room number 3, I would go straight into my disempowered self. These days I don't. These days I empower myself, because I realised that I understand the situation, that I would want to have a doctor sort out all my woes for me, but they can't help me unless I can share my knowledge of what's going on with them. And that means that we've got to meet together in what Eric Byrne would call the adult. So yeah, different models can be used to help us understand what is going on around us, and then you give yourself choice.
So it's part of this confidence, self-confidence,
I should say,
belief in yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I should say it would the more you know yourself and the more resilience that you have, and the more choice that you can offer yourself about how to behave in given circumstances, the more confident you're going to be, for sure.
So for our listeners, crew working on board, conflict is obviously something that crew may have to deal with, working in very confined spaces. If there's a clash of personalities, or if there's a particularly busy day and at the end of the day everyone's tired and there is a bit of conflict on board, would these tools help crew understand how to deal with that?
Yeah, I think so, because what it would do is it would give you choice. I mean, I only mentioned one. There's another one which amused me when I first heard it. It's Daniel Hoffman's model about core qualities, and it's split into 4 things. So everybody has qualities, a number of them, and they're all valid. It's just that in the wrong circumstances, they can be difficult. So if you had a quality of being overly friendly, being very friendly and warm, then the pitfall of that quality might be that people take advantage of you. So the challenge for you would be to be able to balance your warmness and your helpfulness alongside a bit of a steeliness and have strong enough boundaries to say no to people. And as a really warm person, you would be allergic to demanding people. And it was the allergy thing that made me laugh, because I can often see that in other people and my responses to other people. I don't like some people. And Daniel Hoffman calls it an allergy. So then the opposite applies. If you're one of these, I don't know, very demonstrable, demanding people, then you're going to be allergic to people that you see as being soft and too helpful without boundaries. So if you were stuck on board your yacht and everybody's tired and it's the end of a day and things needed to be done, you could perhaps, if you understood that model, you could perhaps think to yourself, this is not a good time for me to speak to Ruth, because I can be really allergic to Ruth when she's at the end of a long day and she's going to be really demanding, and I just want peace on board the yacht.
I love that, allergies. I love that, because it's true. You can't be liked by everyone and you won't like everyone. So it's learning how to manage that. And that is a big self-development process, isn't it? So Ruth, at the moment we're talking about small challenges, conflict on board, tiredness, stress. How does learning to manage these small everyday challenges, does that help us be better prepared for bigger life events?
Absolutely. And I think it's really helpful to think about what are the differences between small T traumas, let's call them that, the everyday things, and the large T traumas, the big events that we all quite readily recognise as being significant things. So what might small T traumas be? It could be things like you've described, conflict, interpersonal conflict between crew members. It could be infidelity in our relationships. It could be an abrupt or an extended relocation. So something like somebody on a long rotation when you're in a space with somebody else for a long period of time, and added to that, away from family and friends who are at home. All of these things can just accumulate over time to build into traumatic experiences. Other things that might happen while someone's away, something like, let's say you're serving dinner and you spill a drink over a guest of the owner. In the scheme of things, it's not a big event. However, we can feel so embarrassed about doing something like that, we can make it into a bigger thing in our head. These things that on their own are little one-off experiences, but if we have several of them and they build up over time, they can tend to impact us more. They can cause us to feel shame, guilt, or embarrassment. So learning to recognise and work with those and work with our responses to those prepares us for being able to deal with the big T traumas. And the big T traumas are distinguished as almost the extraordinary and significant events that we would all perhaps see reported on the news. So things like a natural disaster, a terrorist attack, it could be a sexual assault, it could be a collision at sea. All of these big T traumas are things that happen completely out of the blue. So there's an element of unpredictability about big T traumas. It can cause feelings of helplessness in us and powerlessness. And with big T traumas, we'll quite often do a lot to avoid having anything to do with the memory of them. So we might put aside things that remind us of that event that might happen. We might not go back to the place that it happened. So by working on ourselves, by building resilience, growing resilience, and that could be through tools that you engage with yourself. It could be through working with a therapist. It could be having some coaching with a coach. The more you get to know yourself better, as Richard says, we're the only constant in that environment. If we can regulate ourselves more effectively, so keep ourselves on a steady path, we're less likely to be pushed into a space of overreacting when something big happens. We can manage it much better.
I have an image in my mind of how I would deal with a big T trauma, and I would hope, I would help, I would be calm. But in reality, I don't know how I'm going to react. So how can you predict your reaction? How can you prepare for something that you don't quite know how you're going to react anyway?
It's really interesting. We were talking about this the other day, Richard, about the responses to trauma. And I'm thinking, if anybody has TikTok or Instagram and you ever watch the prank reels that come up, somebody jumps out on someone, then you get to see the wide range of people's responses to an unexpected event. Some people will try and fight the person when they get a fright. Other people will drop to the ground and just be overcome by the shock of it. Other people might try to get themselves out of that situation by running in the opposite direction. And I think through self-work, whether that's self-guided work, coaching work, psychotherapy work, you can become familiar with how you might respond. And then when the thing happens, whatever that thing might be, by that time you've built in a thinking space to recognise how you would choose to respond rather than how we might automatically respond. And I think that's really important. It's the move away from reacting to responding to something. It's the thinking gap that gives us that element of choice.
And you can control that. You can be in charge of how you react to something that, you know, may never have happened before in our lives and is quite a shock and it's sudden and we're not prepared for it, but you can actually be prepared for it.
I think we can be as prepared as we possibly can be if we engage in preparatory work. I think that's maybe the key.
My thoughts are that when something happens, it's a big shock, one of those big T traumas, and it happens, and you haven't seen it coming, it catches you unawares, you don't really get much choice of that in that moment. You go into fight, flight, or what they call fight, flight, or freeze. And I tend to think of freeze as being more acceptance of what's going on. It's merely for me, and my experience of when I've been involved in things like that, I'll leap out of the way. I might shout back at somebody, or swing my arm at them, or I might be totally shocked. But then comes that point when I've got some space, and as Ruth is saying, I've got a chance to think then. And if you are resilient, that's the point at which your resilience will start to kick in, and you start to give yourself choices about whether you continue that initial flinch reaction to whatever it is that's happened. In my experience, what happens for people is they start to judge themselves on that thing that happens that they don't have. It's a millisecond, it's half a synapse that it happens in, and then you find yourself leaping back. I'm gonna out myself now. Only a few days ago I had a road rage incident, and I didn't even think about screaming and shouting at the guy who was screaming and shouting at me. But afterwards I was quite ashamed. I just thought to myself, oh my word, and apologized to the person I was with. I said, you've never seen me behave like that, have you? I said, I'm really, really sorry. And I was quite shook for a while about that, because it happened just, in a synapse. And that's the point at which I can start judging myself and start giving myself unhelpful messages about the way that I responded to that. And that's where, I guess, my resilience, thinking about it now on the hoof, that's where my resilience kicked in, that I thought to myself, no, that was something that happened and it's over with. I've dealt with it. Thankfully, we were so tight together in the cars, we couldn't get at each other, even if we'd have wanted to, and we both drove off. So maybe that helps to explain that, there is a synapse, a split second when fight, flight, or freeze will kick in. And then you get the chance, I think, with emotional resilience, to make some choices about what you're going to do. And then afterwards, to start with the internal narrative, not to be too judgmental on yourself about that.
And I think it's really important to remember that at their very basic level, all of these options are survival strategies.
Yeah.
So sometimes not doing anything is what our bodies recognise as being the best thing to do to survive that situation. So Richard called it freeze. It can also be it can be seen as just acceptance of the situation. Let's just get through this. There's something here about it's our body's take on what is the best way to survive this.
Absolutely, and valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've talked about this book a few times, The Chimp Paradox, and I'm fascinated by it because, essentially your brain is doing everything. All the communications from your brain are to protect you, and it just uses your history, events that have happened in your past as the guidance as to, okay, what's going to happen next. And everything is done to protect you, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, what you just talked about, I'm looking up here. Look at this. I'm going to reach. I can't help myself. I've got the Chimp Paradox on the bookshelf here. There it be.
Oh, I've got it right here too.
What he does, Steve Peters, is he simplifies things that a lot of people can start making it more confusing. So that's a really simplified version of what goes on, particularly around fear reaction, which is what we're talking about. And I think it's a really helpful book for people to look at if they wanted to and learn a little bit about themselves. But again, it's just all about protecting ourselves and here to protect the species. And it's called the Chimp Paradox for good reason. Everybody's got it. I mean, you see dogs and cats doing it. They're responding the same way. You can see animals, reptiles, birds, they all respond the same way.
I've named my chimp Doris. I mentioned this before. And it's when Doris takes control. This is when it's going wrong. So emotional resilience is is helping me to calm Doris.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And the more that you know you've got your Doris, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, it's aspects of self. And I think that that's another important thing with emotional resilience is those qualities that I talked about earlier, that Daniel Hoffman calls them qualities. Eric Berne calls them ego states, parent, adult, child, critical parent, nurturing parent, the adults, the manipulative child, the free child, and the conforming child. Everybody's got all of these aspects of self that they use. And I think the more that you know the different aspects of yourself and the different qualities that you have, the more that you can pull on them in different circumstances. And that's, again, is resilience. So I know that I brought my wrong self forward in that road rage incident. What I should have brought forward was my grounded, sensible therapist self.
Yes.
Who would have seen that the poor guy was really trying to protect himself and probably misread the circumstance. And I could have been really calm with him.
But I mean, in intense, high pressure situations, it's very difficult not to react, isn't it? So, Ruth, what are some of the practical ways that we can grow our resilience, so to speak, to start talking to our chimps?
Sure. So, I'm going to share with you a couple of things today. So, a really simple breathing exercise and a grounding exercise. The breathing exercise is so simple. And I want to share a little bit of background about how this works, just so there's an appreciation of why. So if we think about our nervous system, it splits into two different branches, and we've got our sympathetic nervous system, which is the one that controls that fight-flight reaction, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which complements it. But that's the side of our nervous system, in a sense, that tells us to rest and digest. It helps us to come down after a difficult experience has occurred. So anything that we can do to activate our parasympathetic nervous system when we are experiencing distress is going to help us by what we call bottom-up self-regulation. So top-down is when we use our heads to talk things out and make it okay through talking. Bottom-up is when our bodies support our head to settle down. So this breathing exercise activates the vagus nerve, which is part of our parasympathetic nervous system. And it's so easy. You can do it anywhere. And I would recommend everyone practice it during the small times of the day when they're doing nothing stressful. Making a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, going for a wee, anything that takes about 2 minutes. It's a perfect time to practice this breathing exercise. So you breathe in through your nose for the count of 4. And you breathe out your mouth for 8, but like you're blowing bubbles in a milkshake. So a very controlled. So in for 4, out for 8. And if you can do that breathing exercise for 2 minutes minimum, but up to 5 minutes is when you really start to feel the benefit of that breathing exercise. And if you practice that at times when things feel easy, non-stressful, when you're faced with a stressful event, and you start to breathe in that style, your body's like, oh, I remember this. This helps me feel calm. And then you can actually prevent yourself from moving into that space of what we might call hyperarousal, when our nervous systems start to fire and we start to perhaps show signs of anxiety, stress, or distress. So that breathing exercise is a super one to use. And that's called a 4-8 breathing pattern. In for 4 and out for 8. If you find yourself in a difficult situation, you've had a small T trauma, let's say, and you're feeling a bit anxious, a bit upset, there's a really simple grounding exercise that you can use that will bring you back into this moment. And when we are spending time in this moment, we're not worrying about what might happen in 10 minutes time or tomorrow. We're not worrying about what happened yesterday. We're only focusing on this moment. So it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's name 5 things that you can see in the environment around about you, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So what can you see, touch, hear, smell, taste in your environment? And when we use all of our senses, again, that just brings us back to existing in the here and now. And we literally cannot be as worried about things that have happened or may happen if we're in the now. So I just wanted to share those really simple exercises that can support fostering and developing emotional resilience.
I will definitely be using that one. I like the sound of that. That's very good. So You mentioned earlier Sage, the company that you've both set up. What service do you offer?
Okay, so we offer a number of different services actually. So we can work with yacht management companies to ensure that their policies and procedures, especially those to do with risk and business continuity if a major incident happens, that those policies and procedures take into account mental health and well-being. Are the crew's needs looked after and taken care of in those policies? So that's one thing that we can do. We can also attend immediately after a major or critical incident to offer both group support and individual support. And I think that's the great thing about us having that therapeutic background is we can come and work with those people who've been impacted by the event that's happened right then and there and get immediate support. So when we work with a problem when it's fresh, it can often prevent longer term mental health struggles or difficulties happening as a consequence of that. And between us and our colleagues, we've got a range of really effective trauma treatments that can be put into place in that scenario. We can also offer aftercare. So once that event has happened, if you do feel that you might need a bit of therapy to help you process what's happened, us and our network of colleagues can provide therapeutic support. And if you're someone who wants to prepare for the possibility of a major or critical incident happening, we can work with you in a coaching style to do this preparatory work to help people armour themselves in as many ways as possible and to grow resilience so that if something should happen, they've got that space of responding rather than reacting. We can also offer family liaison services. So if something has happened and there's maybe a difficulty in communication or if there's a complex situation happening, that we can work with both the yacht management company and the affected person's family as a liaison service or support yacht management team members to act as liaison.
So you're pre an event, you can do some resilience training. What are the lengths of the training courses?
It's bespoke to each individual. So we would work with individuals who wanted to grow their own preparedness and resilience in that way. So if anybody out there feels that they'd like to explore that, they'd be more than welcome to give us a wee call and we can arrange a brief telephone or Zoom meeting to discuss what that might look like. We can create bespoke packages.
And that's online or?
Yes, it would be online so that if people are away from home, they can still access the service.
So pre-critical incident resilience training,
yes.
Critical incident care,
yes,
at the point, and then aftercare as well.
Yes.
It's a lot of ground to cover there, isn't there?
I would also sort of, I'd also say that the actual sort of coaching model is also useful for yourself individually. If anybody was interested in wanting to understand themselves better, feel more confident in themselves and feel that resilience themselves, then they could seek out coaching to get some better insight into those qualities and aspects of themselves, obviously for the work that they do on the yachts, but beyond that as well. These are life skills that can be developed and can be used wherever you go.
And it's an ever-changing world at the moment, isn't it? There's a lot to be resilient against at the moment. So very important life skill. Well, I mean, it all sounds amazing. Give us the link to your website so that we can attach it to the show notes. I'm intrigued by it all. I think it's very important. I think it's something that everyone should do. You almost wonder why it's not taught in schools, that self-awareness and how to manage your emotions, and how much conflict would it stop if we all just had that, learn how to give ourselves that little bit of space.
I mean, we have so much physical education, so many hours of physical education in English schools, Welsh and Scottish schools. Just take one of those sessions away, give children something along.
It would be amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. No, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for talking to us about and explaining to me about emotional resilience. And I think I might have to dig out the book again and have another little read. And we'll look forward to speaking to you in the future, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to be here and talking with you today.
Same goes for me. Had a bit of fun too.
Thank you.